Um, Today we're going to talk about metaphysics. It's our first meeting that's different from ethics. So from the past 4 meetings, they have all been about ethics and about the subject of what is good and what is right to do. Metaphysics is completely different. If you remember from our first meeting about the parts of philosophy, you might remember that metaphysics was also one of the parts that we talked about. The dictionary definition of metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principle of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. So that just gives kind of a list of abstract concepts that are really hard to understand. So I think a better way to understand what metaphysics is to break it apart into the parts of the word. Metaphysics, the word, is made out of meta and physics. I'm sure that most of you know what physics is. It's a study in science that studies, I guess it's a physical science. The difference between physics and metaphysics is, well, literally, the difference is meta. But essentially, metaphysics means something that is beyond physics, something that defies physical understanding and that we cannot apply our knowledge of physics to. So just to make what metaphysics is exactly more clear, here are some examples of foundational questions in metaphysics. These are the metaphysical questions that philosophers have been pondering for centuries, or even millennia. What is the nature of existence/reality? What characterizes identity? Do humans have free will? What is the nature of the mind? And finally, what, if anything, is fundamental to the universe? So all of these are, again, kind of abstract and vague. So today, our main discussion topic is going to be on the third one, which is, do humans have free will? Because this is probably one of the most well-known and definitely, in my opinion, the easiest to understand and to have a discussion on. So before we actually get into the discussion on free will, just to really quickly boil down differences in metaphysical questions and non-metaphysical questions, I made a list here. One example of a non-metaphysical question is, if I hold a block of wood 5 meters above the ground, how long will it take to drop? So that's not metaphysical because that's something that physics can understand and can predict the behavior of the block. On the other hand, a metaphysical question is, does this wood block even exist? How do we know it exists? How do we acquire this knowledge, etc.? That would be a metaphysical question. Another example is a non-metaphysical question is, what is the best way for a student to study for a math exam? That's once again something that is easily quantifiable and easily able to be studied. Whereas a metaphysical question is, does our student even have free will to choose how he studies, or is it just something that's natural and that he has no control over? So as we can see, once again, the difference here is that this metaphysical question is not something that can easily be discussed, or sorry, not discussed, can easily be tested or investigated. Before we move on to our central question for today's meeting, which is the existence of free will, does anyone have any questions about metaphysics, the field in general?
So, like,
Wait, what'd you say? I think you cut out, or maybe my internet's bad. Anthony?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So basically, metaphysical is like doubt everything, and non-metaphysical is like scientific, basically.
Well, it's not really doubt everything. It's just evaluating things that cannot be evaluated with physics. So it's not exactly doubt everything.
All right.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? It's a bit confusing, but it's okay because understanding exactly what metaphysics isn't completely essential to our discussion today. Also, by the way, am I lagging for anyone? Because I just got your internet connection is unstable. Okay, well, if I'm lagging, let me know. I think my internet has been unstable for the entire day today. Okay. So now I'm going to introduce everyone to the topic of free will. Does free will exist? And if so, how do we know? And if not, how do we know that it doesn't exist? So yesterday's meeting, I used a crash course video, but that ended up failing because Zoom didn't work, and I couldn't figure out how to do it today either. So instead, I'm just going to give the introduction to free will. To do that, let me introduce everyone to 3 scenarios. The first scenario. Let's say that someone with a gun comes up to you, you're in a dark alleyway, and they put the gun to your head and says, "Give me all your money." And then you give them all their money. Who thinks that's free will? Or is that free will?
That technically is free will, because like, hey, there's a slim chance that I'm gonna refuse and he might not shoot me, but or I could just wrestle the gun out of his hands. There's still the slim chance that I might be able to get out of this alive with my money. But yeah, but it's a larger chance that you'll die. So it's better to give money and be safe than die.
Okay. Well, what if the situation was you're robbed at gunpoint and then you gave them the money because you were scared for your life? So we know that you did give the money.
Well,
So
that's
in
free
that case,
will. Well, that's free will because your emotion, because like you're scared
It's
and
glitching now.
you give him the money.
okay. Who thinks it's not free will? And Anthony, we'll get back to your point later.
Wait, I I think nothing is free will because this because I think if you have enough data about the universe and predict how every single particle in the universe is gonna interact, you could probably figure out what's gonna happen.
So that's definitely a cornerstone of the determinist argument. So we'll talk more about that later as well. You actually predicted the future, kind of. Okay, Jason, you have your hand up? Jason, did you want to say something? You're muted. Okay, well, you can type in chat if you want to. In the meantime, let's see what chat has to say. So Ariel says, I don't believe it is free will because most people have a love for life. So they will not wish to refuse, so they give their money as their only option. So yeah, I actually would assume that most people think that this is not free will because the argument is you don't really have another option. When you're weighing your life and your money, most people would choose to give the money. Isabel says, I think it is free will because you're still making the choice to give him the money. Yeah, the other option sucks and you're probably going to die, but you're still making a decision. Okay, so for Isabel, it's true that you're still making a decision, but is it really a decision if... I mean, because I'd assume that pretty much nobody would choose to die in this situation. So even though it technically is a decision, isn't that a bit too loose of a definition of decision? Like you're kind of being coerced into it, right? Okay, and for those of you who are joining right now, we went over an introduction of metaphysics, and right now we're talking about the question of do we have free will? Let me introduce the second scenario. And Jason, I see you still have your hand up, but I'm not sure why, maybe you're having trouble with the mic, but you can feel free to type it in the chat. The second scenario is completely unrelated to the first. Now let's say that you're born, your father is a lawyer, and when you grow up, you go to law school, and then you become a lawyer too. And then you tell everyone, wow, I chose to be a lawyer. This is my free will. Whereas in reality, is it possible that it was not really free will? You think it's your free will, but in reality, your father influenced you to go to law school. So in this case, what are your opinions on whether or not this is free will?
Sorry. It's in every case a case of your free will. Like, it's your free will if you want to follow in your father's footsteps. You could just perfectly become a chef or a captain or something. But like, if any career, you could go on any career path. It's just you know, my father's a very successful lawyer. I want to follow in his footsteps. You know, you know what I mean? Because
Okay, I see. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask the question of what constitutes free will right after. So I'll ask you
if
that in a bit.
if you're
But yeah,
alright,
sorry, go ahead.
calling anything not free will, calling this in the lawyer thing, not free will isn't true unless your father explicitly threatens to beat you up or do something bad to you, unless you go to law school. So yeah, to quote Intellion in the chat, it is because you have the choice to go to law school or not.
Okay, well, in the previous question, didn't you say that even if you're robbed at gunpoint, it's still free will? So isn't
No, because there was still, you're like driven by fear. If you were brave, and the adrenaline started kicking in, you just whip around, grab the gun from his hands, and start sticking him up.
well, but why is your dad threatening to beat you different? Like, you could probably run away and call the cops.
But he's a father figure. You don't want to lose family.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. So Annie says it's not exactly free will because we make our decisions because we're influenced by society and the environment that already exists, which is technically being told and forced in a way we are not always conscious of. Okay, I'll get back to you later, Annie, as well. Henry says your decision is basically made of your experiences, so you have free will of the choices that you think are possible for you at the time. That's fair too, and I'll get back to you as well too. Isabel.
I guess that there's like no such thing as free will because there's always going to be like an impact somewhere. So it's like will, but not free.
Wait, you mean a cause somewhere or an impact somewhere? What do you mean by impact?
Yeah, but you're the one that chooses to believe and be influenced by the influence and the surroundings.
Wait, but you're technically just a well, your will is technically just a bunch of nerve cells interacting with each other, and whatever stimuli it's introduced with.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that later, definitely. Yeah. So, as Michael said, there's the argument that you might think it's free will, but in reality, maybe everything is just the interaction of your neurons and your sensory things to the environment. But we're going to talk about that later. And yeah, Annie says that in the chat too, basically. So that's called determinism, and we're going to go over that once again later. Let's first finish the third scenario first. This scenario is mostly for people who said that the first choice and the second choice are not free will. So not the people who said that they think that anything is free will. So let's say that you eat a chocolate, and you think that you ate the chocolate because of your free will, but in reality, when you were born, somewhere in your genes, it said that you're going to like chocolate. So you like chocolate, and that's why you ate it. So you really have no other choice because you like it, and you're going to eat it. But do you have a choice? Maybe you did have a choice. Maybe you could resist. How do you know you can resist? So is this free will?
You could try.
Well, but the problem is if you try to resist and you end up succeeding in resisting, then maybe it was not free will either. Maybe you were just destined to resist and succeed.
Yeah, but destiny is what will happen. So what will happen will always be what will happen.
So if we believe in the concept of destiny, then there's just no free will. But how do we know that there is such a thing as destiny? So I guess now I'm on the other side.
Well, I guess if you're like religious, you'll always believe in destiny, but you're not. If you're not, then I don't know.
I mean, if you believe in destiny, then nobody has any free will. It was just all made before. So technically, you have decisions. Nobody ever has decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Destiny is kind of another way to put the determinist argument as well. So out of all three of these situations, out of being robbed at gunpoint, out of going to law school because your dad went to law school, and out of eating a chocolate, what exactly constitutes free will? Is it the existence of multiple choices? Is it the absence of likely causes? What exactly makes free will? How do we determine if something is free will? Isobel says free will is having no boundaries or consequences to a possible decision. Well, I think that's a very limited definition. That's definitely a valid point, but I think that's a very limited definition of free will, because if you say that, then anything has boundaries. You have to, there's like physical constraints, and you have to like obey physics and stuff like that, I guess. So in that case, would nothing be free will?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that, I guess that's a valid conclusion to draw from that line of thinking. Henry says your experiences and opportunities limit your possible decisions, and you make your best choice in mind. Wait, so you think that free will is like the absence of prior experiences, or the other way around? I'm not exactly sure. And he says you can try not to eat. Okay, so going back to the chocolate point, you can try not to eat the chocolate, but then whether or not you succeed is based on what society tells you. This influence is not free will, and this influence decides whether or not you succeed or not. So Annie, would you say that the absence of influences is what makes free will? Like if you're influenced by nothing, then you're acting freely. And also, does anyone have any other alternate criterion for determining what constitutes free will? Yeah, so Annie says, yes, but then we are always influenced. There is no exact free will. That's also the determinist argument. Sissy says, I don't think people actually make decisions through their minds. Humans has a force that's extremely illogical when making choices. Can you elaborate on that? Okay, in the meantime, I'm going to move on to the next slide. The next slide is going to introduce the common positions on the free will debate. There's three main positions. The first position is libertarian free will. And note that this is not like political libertarianism. That's completely different. This is called libertarian free will. What libertarian free people who support this side of the argument say that humans do indeed have free will. And there's a wide variety of arguments on this, but essentially most of them boil down to something like, we've always operated under this assumption, or like, if you want to do something, then you do it. There's not much, I mean, what's stopping you, I guess. So libertarian free will has been definitely one of the dominant sides of this debate. However, on the other side is hard determinism. And a lot of you alluded to hard determinism, especially you, Michael. What hard determinism says is that humans do not have free will. Every action is controlled by factors out of our control. For example, let's take a look at the physical world. If I drop an apple from a tree, the apple falls down and hits the ground, and then like splatters or something. We can predict that. We know that's exactly going to happen. Was it the apple's free will? No. But what about humans? You were born, your genes are a certain
The
way.
apple has nothing to decide.
Yeah, exactly. So determinists would argue that humans aren't really much different. Because, for example,
But technically, yeah, we were just meant to be born. So we technically had no free will of whether we wanted to be born or not.
yeah, and not only
We
being
never had free will.
not only being born, but also, like for example, I see a chocolate here, and my neuron fires.